every resource we can to participate in the new financial system we're building. As part of that, we're talking to members of our community to get their takes and opinions on favorite assets and where DeFi is going. Today, I'm talking with Alex Tinsman. She's the former president of the NEM Foundation, current VP of marketing at Near Protocol, and advisor to a number of other crypto companies. Hi, Alex. Thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks for having me. It is a pleasure to be here with everyone today.
Likewise, we're happy we got to speak with you. Zach on the crypto team introduced us to you. He definitely told us that you were someone who had a rich history of experience in the crypto sphere. And so, we're really excited to have you on board and to hear about what you've been up to lately.
So I've been around blockchain since about 2016 as an investor, and then moved into a community member for a couple of different blockchains, and then ended up as president of the NEM Foundation, and now have evolved into VP of marketing for Near. But during that time, I've worked with so many partners and community members, and from the United Nations all over the place. And I think one of the things that I love is kind of hearing the stories and learning more about how people are building on different protocols and why. And so a lot of the insights of chatting with partners and hearing more about their experiences led me to take a look at pain points in the industry. And we talk a lot about security and code audits, but one of the pain points I recognized is there's not a lot of resources for people around crypto economics and understanding why certain crypto economics are set up the way they are, what the impact is, what happens when it goes wrong. Yet you have so many companies that are raising millions and millions and millions of dollars, but there's not a company that's doing certification for crypto economics and saying, yes, this is sound and this makes sense. So one of the projects that I'm an advisor on is called Predixa, and it's predixa.com, but it has a really unique place in the space because it basically has a focus on the economic systems of crypto economic, basically of tokens, crypto tokens, and DeFi. So again, Predixa is not set up to do audits for investments. That's not, and it's not a code audit. It is specifically focused on crypto economics and certification for blockchain. Now, they have a 21-point audit system. So it's pretty thorough. It's a pretty thorough security audit, and they focus on long-term stability of rewards and incentives, scalability and growth risks, things like what happens when transactions go too high. And they build out models of all the different top coins based on these different features. Another thing is resistance to economic crashes when that happens, because we all see when that happens, it can be a disaster. Exploits and potential vulnerabilities. So really, it's like I said, it's a detailed audit for economics of both DeFi and crypto tokens. And then it's given a rating, and there's a rating system from 1 to 10. And then they have certification. So I thought that this was really timely because what we're seeing in the DeFi space is a lot of eyeballs, right? A lot of people are trying to grok what DeFi is. There's a lot of fast moving parts, and there's a lot of scams, and there's also a lot of competition. And I think this gives a much needed new perspective and lens to think through projects and to have discussions about. So for me, being an advisor on the project was a natural fit. It was something that I thought, oh, this is filling a gap in the industry, and this is important, right?
Absolutely. I think, like I mentioned earlier, kind of the crypto partnerships team at OKCoin is also involved in the token listing aspect. And so one of the things that we always look at when we list new assets is the crypto economics, right? Is this asset stable? Is it, for lack of a better term, like, is it a good asset, right? And the economic portion has a huge part in that. It has actually, and to your point, been very difficult to assess. It's actually probably one of the bigger, heavier lifts of the token listing process, right? Really understanding the economics and exactly like how it will play out is something that we do, but it takes a lot longer than say like the security audit, because there are companies who have already
Yes.
started doing that.
Yeah, I try and explain this to people so at my time with NEM, we're listed on a lot of great exchanges, right? And one of the things that I learned is, through this process, it's really hard because the community will say, oh, you're not working with exchanges. And I'll say, yes, no, we are. We really are on, we're on these contracts and gag orders. We can't talk about it, right? But the discussions with the exchanges is always around what is your marketing plan? Who are the developers and the development team? What does sustainability look like, right? There's these aspects, but then you get to the business plan, which people don't realize exchanges expect and should have a thorough business plan of the product. And crypto economics right now and DeFi, this whole space is so open, and the regulations keep changing, that people don't realize third parties, we need more third parties in the systems to certify and say, this has been reviewed. And it's not just to get things moving forward, it's actually to create standards where there are no standards, right? So, and to do due diligence is super important. So working with exchanges in the past, working with hundreds of exchanges, it's just been eye-opening to me. And it's one of the reasons, again, why I was so excited about Predixa, but also excited to work with platforms like NEM, like Near. Working interoperability has also opened up the doors for so many different chains working together towards a common good and working towards regulations. So I think all of this fits into a really nice picture of, for all of your listeners, there's movement happening in this space, and getting informed about things like this now is important because the entire landscape is changing, and it's changing so fast.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been really exciting this year has been the standardization of a number of things. I think the technical code audit has, there are a number of firms that do a really great job. There are a number of compliance organizations that look at the assets kind of status as a security under the Howey test or existing regulation. Looking at the crypto economics, I think, is just the next follow-up. So I have to think the standardization of norms in the space, I think, is a good sign of maturity.
Yeah, so do I. I think when you think about DeFi and when you think about just the challenges in this space right now, there's so many complexities, right? And there's these companies that want to establish their reputation right away, and they're they're trying so hard to get fame and mind share, and really I think about a lot of the protocols and the fact that they're giving away tokens, right? You see that a lot in DeFi. It's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. So I think the next step with crypto economics and kind of DeFi and taking a closer look at the protocols is really the question we should be asking is, how are these companies that are giving away all these tokens going to switch to something more sustainable in the future? Is this system still that they're doing still going to function if they don't find a way to stabilize inflation? And I personally think a lot of, I think we're still seeing developers don't know the answer to that. I think that's a problem. I think they're hoping to figure it out, which is why I think companies like what Predixa is doing, building out these economic models and helping and support through I'm a big fan of system integrators. Support through system integrators, helping through those pain points is important. So I think there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of education, to outline. So
yeah, I think the point you brought up about kind of the openness of the DeFi space, how quickly it's changing, is really interesting. the way we look at it right now is that DeFi is starting to resemble more and more the complex financial products that we see in the mainstream.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, you know, a lot of maybe the genesis of crypto came from, I guess, the breakdown of this complexity, right? People just building products on top of each other and no one really understanding kind of how intertwined or like what the dependencies are. So as someone who's really looking at the crypto economics, what are things that you're keeping an eye on in DeFi as we continue to build actually like a financial framework that is very complex?
Yeah, I think most DeFi audits are a lot more simple to audit than I would say, typical code, or typical crypto assets. I think the code is on smart contracts, so that makes it easier, right? You usually don't have layers upon
Yep.
layers upon layers of mechanisms. Yeah, and DeFi assets are usually built on underlying networks like Ethereum. So that means they can skip over a lot of the economic decisions around mining rewards. I mean, that's really in the hands of the project to handle. So, but it also means that as they're starting up and they're moving faster, they can, prove their economics faster. But it also means when there's vulnerabilities, like let's just use Ethereum as an example. If there's vulnerabilities or congestion, then there's a risk that actually carries over into the economic side and or every asset that's built on it. So I think there's, I think there's a lot of pros and cons. I also think it's worth mentioning, I think people may have different descriptions, of how they think of crypto economics. So I do want to share for a minute that there's two categories that I think of when I think of crypto economics. One is that you have a network system, right? So this covers the operations that are directly on the blockchain. This is your miners that are getting rewards. This is users that are paying the transaction fees and so forth like that. It's smart contracts and all the different kind of tokens that can be traded. And DeFi again falls in this category because it's based on smart contracts. So there's companies that are like Predixa that are looking at inflation rates, that are looking at fees and staking and lockups, all things like that. So the second part of this category is the ecosystem, and this is where my expertise comes in. So the ecosystem is the parties that are outside the blockchain, right, and how they interact with each other, which is what you were just talking about, right? People haven't always thought through what that looks like. So this is thinking about miners have to pay their rent. And they usually have to pay their rent with fiat. So exchanges like you are super important to parties outside of the blockchain and how they interact with one another, right? It's a necessary part of the system right now. And then you have the companies that build the apps on the blockchain. And then you have the foundation, which is, I've worked for NEM Foundation and now the NEAR Foundation, and these help fund development. So these are the kinds of things that we think about with economics of governance and financial regulations and risk and all of that. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about crypto economics, is really taking a look at the companies that are doing the governance could also be on thin ice in terms of regulations, and that is a potential risk to crypto economics. So it's really helpful to have some guidance in these areas and have people taking a look at what it means to have audits on crypto economics. And again, you go to Predixa and you can download free audits, so you can actually see in more detail what it looks like with Uni, what it with Uniswap, what it looks like with other DeFi projects. There's a ton there, but I definitely think that there's a lot of momentum happening, and that DeFi just, at the heart of DeFi, it is more simple to audit just because of the smart contracts, but there's also a lot of scams. So you have to pay attention and take a closer look too.
Yeah, I think, I absolutely agree with you. I think in some ways it is very simple, right? Like you said, the code and the technology, it's based in a smart contract, right? So it's an input and then you get an output, right? Like if it meets certain criteria, then something happens, right? That's like the definition of the smart contract. But I think what's been really fascinating to see has been, how that simplicity has been used to build these new products, right? I think what I just find so fascinating, and maybe is why people have just started, flowing into DeFi to some extent, has been the interplay actually between protocols like Uni, like Harvest, like Yearn, all of them kind of integrating with each other and continuing to build off the composability basically, right? Like I think previously before DeFi, we were
Yeah.
seeing, one blockchain and that ecosystem is just that ecosystem, right? But now with DeFi and like the last like 5 months, we're seeing the ecosystem actually, like the default is for the ecosystem to include other kind of protocols, right? So I think that's just been like really fascinating to see.
Yeah, it's super. I like to remind people that are coming into this space, and myself included, because sometimes I get really excited about a product, and I want to go look at the protocol, and then I have to remind myself, calm down. Like this is, it's still in the experimental stage, right? It's so easy to get swept away with the idea of a product, but you have to look under the hood. I think we have a long way to go until we can see really good evidence of what it's going to make it to mainstream. I think Uniswap has done an amazing job. I think they're world class actually with what they're doing. But I think that I have teenagers, and when I was trying to explain DeFi to them and explain the space a little more. And one of the things I said to them is kind of like having all these baby turtles on a beach. They've just had, hatched, and there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and it's overwhelming the beach, and they're all swimming to the ocean. And you know what sucks? Not all of them make it, only a few. So you can get excited and you can root, but at the end of the day, there's only going to be a couple. And what happens to the rest? They get left behind, right? So in layman's terms, like, we like to break it down pretty simple to them. That's where we're at right now. I think the pivotal point though, is the deciding factors in making it go mainstream is going to be around automated regulatory compliance. And so I think we should, maybe talk about that for a bit too. I think take a look at all the different countries with all the different regulations that they have and the different securities that around that people are trading. I mean, you're seeing this with exchanges, right? So KYC plays an accredited investor in the United States have KYC before they can buy, private company stock. And now what we're seeing is that with DeFi and with some of these projects in the space, we're seeing that there's rules and behaviors that specific assets may have built into them that will change change things. So I just want you to think about, if you trade stocks with a permissionless DeFi protocol, and all the while you could still meet all the regulatory requirements of your country, what would that look like? That's when I get excited. I'm like, oh, wait, let's talk about this, because this kind of goes against the permissionless ideals for DeFi, right? And I know I'm going to get hate mail over this, but it's really allowing the big, they'll hit me on Twitter, but it's really going to allow the big institutions to migrate every part of those securities, right? The security trading ecosystems into interconnected markets, which is what you were talking about before. So it's literally the asset is stopping itself from going to someone who's not accredited. This is going to happen, right? It goes against the permissionless ideals of DeFi, but this is coming. This is coming.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's something that actually catalyzes a lot of very, I would say, heated debate internally, because we are a regulated exchange. We do KYC all of our customers. And, on the one hand, we are very, on the one hand, we really value that we are a regulated exchange, right? And that's our value prop to the ecosystem. It's, we're regulated, we provide a sense of convenience and comfort and kind of trust that what you're doing is acceptable within certain regulatory regimes. But on the
Yes.
other hand, especially this year as DeFi started to really grow, it's you start questioning or thinking about what is the value of KYC, right? Like you said, what is kind of that tension between KYC and trust versus permissionless protocols and ecosystems. And so that's actually been something that we discuss. It probably just bubbles up like every week in one way or another, whether it's like a certain product we're looking at, a new asset we're looking at. So it's constantly,
Yep.
at the forefront of our minds.
But don't you think that the discussions that you're having, there could potentially be a need for both? Like when I look at the industry, I have different views. It's kind of like when, again, to go back to my kids, when we talk about they just got their first bank accounts and they've had crypto accounts before bank accounts, which is pretty crazy, right? Like we would pay their allowance in crypto and
Very
things like
cool.
that. But anyway, one of the yeah, isn't that funny? So one of the things early on that we talked to them about is for financial means, it's good to have different kinds of financial means. You never want to just have everything in one bucket, right? So I don't know. I think when I think about regulatory compliance and when I think about the different DeFi protocols and KYC, I lean closer to the side of I actually really like the idea of having DeFi protocols that meet regulatory compliance and are kind of all built in. I think it's going to make mainstream adoption happen quicker. So for me, and when I'm explaining that to my kids, I want to see mainstream adoption happen quicker. So that's something that we talk about. Another thing that we talk about is what's happening with the evolution. You can definitely see this during the pandemic, the evolution of economics happening in the world today. I think there has been an escalation because of COVID of banks and companies just in general embracing remote and trying to figure out how to run a business and adhere to all the customers. And I think that a lot of the country's central banks are researching, and a majority of them have been researching and planning to release these, central bank digital currencies sometime in the next, few years. And I think it's wild because this wasn't even a thing, this wasn't even a thing like 12 years ago. This is a new thing that is very likely this is going to change worldwide commerce and is likely going to shift digital dollars and digital yuan within a decade. And then even today, I was reading on CoinDesk that the Chinese central bank I don't know if you saw, they just shared over 4 million transactions totaling more than 2 billion yuan have been conducted using the digital yuan. That pilot ran in multiple Chinese cities. It's been successful. My jaw drops because China's already doing it. They're testing it out. They're rolling it out. It's happening. So that evolution of economies is pretty exciting. And the article talked a little bit more about that COVID and the pandemics are actually escalating this as well. Tim Draper also talked about this recently with Cointelegraph too. So pretty interesting for real time, right? I don't know if you're seeing that at the exchange, but I certainly am seeing more trends of it in this space.
Yeah, yes, I think it has been very fascinating. I think one thing that the pandemic has kind of brought to light, and almost like an indirect way, is the fact that in some instances, our monetary and financial system is actually very physical. There are lots of like physical remnants of our financial system. And whether it's because the pandemic has started to, understandably freak people out about kind of the, in-person nature, or kind of like the friction that exists in the, I would say, like physical world with regard to finance. Like you said,
Yeah.
CBDCs have just, I think the pandemic has really just pushed CBDCs and accelerated that growth. I think we are seeing, yeah, I think we actually, I'm not liberty to say the exact, like the specific instance, but there are, token projects that we have come across that are looking to use crypto as a form of like relief payment. Because in developing countries, COVID has hit them even harder, right? And so the thought of having to meet in person with physical cash, or to distribute relief aid in kind of like physical proximity, is just not feasible anymore. So you need to find different ways to do it.
Yeah, that's, yes, that's exactly it. And it's already being tested right now. That's what I'm trying to, convey to everyone is, my lens is through being an American and, what's happening in the United States. But when I look at what's happening in other countries and them embracing and doing trials like China, way ahead of the curve, right?
Yeah.
And so, people are paying attention, because that is that is where the future is for, right now.
Yeah.
And it's worth it.
Just something that's always in the back of my mind is, Bitcoin has sound money, except the fact that, you don't really want to use your Bitcoin, right? You want to accumulate. You don't necessarily want to like go and buy coffee with Bitcoin. So then, how does that compare to the initial ideal of Bitcoin as sound money, especially when you have advances in DeFi that people are really kind of using the system, right? Not that people like don't use Bitcoin, but you see this like almost frenzied use case in DeFi.
Yeah, I think there's companies like Aave that do flash loans. Super cool. So they're on my short list. Whoa, let's pay attention to what you're doing. This team with their enabling, flash loans that open up, new design space and finance. I think that's pretty good. That's just one off the top of my head that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's been looking at crypto economics and really thinking about all of these different protocols, how do you compare Bitcoin and its sound money concept and with DeFi and its kind of financial utility and application like focus? Like this like complete drive towards application and use case.
I think at the heart of, at the root of every project is governance. And then, there's also community. I think the Bitcoin team, and I would say any DeFi team, can really do a terrible job at economic change. And then if the miners and the community then embrace it and they adopt it, then that project is just, it's going to be crippled. And that's a real problem that's happening. So the strength of Bitcoin is in its governance team. And it's probably why it's the favorite of everyone, right? The governance team is trusted. It's the most careful and the most, cautious in the industry. You have all of the miners are watching, the team very, very carefully. So I would say that, DeFi projects are continually evolving. I think they're innovating and they're providing useful new financial services. I think that's great. I think we need that. But I think until there is governance, established, reliable governance practices and partnerships with their communities, then you're not going to see these things fully be realized. And I think what I'm hearing from you around around all this is really, you have to have both great economics, but also assurance that governance is going to protect those economies. And if they start to do better, then the chances are, DeFi is going to take over the crypto world, and traditional finance, I think, the world would probably go way up. But I'm sure you're seeing something similar on your side from an exchange. I'm sure, if you had to put a big bet, it's always going to be on Bitcoin. which just is,
Yeah, I think you know, I don't know if I'll get hate mail for this either, but we are very the way we think about Bitcoin is the first. And it's the strongest, right? Like, sorry, it in its current state right now it is. And so that's why we invest a lot in development of the Bitcoin core protocol, right? You know, we're reinvesting into what we think is our kind of core technology and core infrastructure. That's of course not to
yeah.
say that, right? It's not to say that we're not seeing development elsewhere, but you know, like I think to your point, the reason why Bitcoin, I think, seems to us to be such a good investment is because of the strength of its governance model. So yes,
Yeah.
it's definitely something that we
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. It has public mind share, it has name recognition, it has trust. There's actual real value to having those things. Is what makes a cryptocurrency useful, right? And I really think Bitcoin is just this base currency of the crypto industry, and has been for a long time. I think that in terms of interoperability, I think Bitcoin tokens on platforms like Ethereum are going to continue to have liquidity advantages, and
Hmm.
it's going to continue to grow. So that's something also I know that people are paying attention to.
Yeah. So you brought governance up a lot. From my
Yeah,
understanding,
I care. Yeah.
yeah. From my understanding, you've had a very personal experience with how with crypto governance, right? My understanding is with the, you know, kind of like the presidency of the NEM Foundation is something that's kind of voted on, and is probably like a direct execution of the protocol's governance, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, so I think, I don't remember if it was last year or something. It was Cointelegraph or CoinDev. I forgot. One of them was asking, folks in the industry, okay, what's the biggest, pain point that you see? What's the one thing that's preventing progress? And my response was governance. And if you ask me again, my response is still going to be governance. Governance is so painful. I think, how should a decentralized project transparently protect the interests of stakeholders and partners, and ensure a well functioning development and product team? And at NEM, I think we made inroads to that, but I don't think that I have seen yet a project that I can personally point to and say they did it.
Mm.
That's it. And so for NEM, I was nominated by the community back in 2019 to be president of the NEM Foundation. And during that time, a lot of hurdles around governance. You had the governance lacked in a few areas. And so we did a merger in April of 2020 this year, where kind of, demolished things and kind of rebuilt the ecosystem to be more effective. And that's still it's still to be seen how things are going to work out for that. But really, I think it's a topic that needs more attention. I think it potentially could open the way for adoption, but I think governance pain really prevent and potentially sabotage a lot of projects, because it's just hard, and
Yeah.
there's not a proven solution. As much as people want to say yes there is, take a look at Decred, or take a look at these different platforms, there's still pain points that I think have not been fully fleshed out, right?
Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
trying,
I
they're trying. Difficult. It's
absolutely.
not with bad intention. It's just there's things you don't think of, or maybe there's facets of governance that evolves over time. And man, it's DeFi governance is super underdeveloped, right? So I just think that projects, I think about in the DeFi space, projects are releasing these governance tokens without enough structure, or even how and when they're going to be used. They just have this general idea of, oh, these tokens are going to be used for voting. But that's great, but there's a bunch of stuff in between that gray area. There's a lot of risk. There's things I think about, like, will holders be able to determine what's in the best interest of the network?
Hmm.
Can a company just get enough tokens to control everything? I mean, think about Uniswap, right? You know, it requires 4% of token holders to participate in passing a proposal, right? And that completely changes the product. So these are barriers. These are barriers to adoption right now. These are barriers that are very real, and people are trying to solve for them, but I don't think anybody's done it yet.
Yeah, so I studied political science in college, and today, for our listeners, is election day here in the States. And so every time, you think about governance, I go through one of two things. The first is kind of like a very niche and targeted view of crypto governance, right? I'm looking at protocols, I'm looking at incentive structures, I'm looking at the smart contract audit, I'm looking at like like wallet holders and who's voting and who has like stuff like that, right? So you take a very like hyper focused crypto view on governance, which I think in some instances is important. But then when you take a step back and you think about what these protocols are actually doing, they're creating governance structures where like if done correctly, like society and like financial ecosystems will live on top of this governance structure, right? And then you think about kind of the corollaries, or sorry, the kind of like what happens in the real world. You think about countries and like systems, like global systems being built on governance, right? And so you kind of just think about it, kind of puts into perspective that on the one hand, it seems like it's a very niche thing that's happening. On the other hand, it's actually a huge undertaking, right? Like if you think about American history or history of any country, it's huge, it's long. Like these things are very difficult to do.
Yeah, and it's a process, right? And over time, regulations get in the way, or there's changes to countries. There's you see a lot of what's happening in the world. Even you take a look at what's happening in Asia today. There's shifting priorities and shifting political power. And so when I think about that, I think that again, governance is really hard. It is evergreen. It's something that's always there and always kind of morphing, and it is a painful aspect of this industry in particular right now. That
do you have an opinion on what the biggest pain point is right now in crypto governance among the many?
The biggest pain point for crypto governance. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I don't know that I have one, one specific area. I think there's just a lot that goes with political power of governances, and there's kind of changing priorities that impact. So I think again, my layer is through having worked for foundations. So for me, the pain point was always around the details, and that's what would get us get us tripped up. So I don't know that it's one thing. I think it's really a combination of political power and having fair equality, and having structure set up, specifically regulations changing has made it very hard. So I don't know, those are just some of the things I think about. I don't have one specific point, I think.
I do believe that we've talked a lot about the value of like education and really understanding kind of these crypto protocols. And I imagine that governance is also one topic that would really benefit from clear, concise education.
Yeah, I mean, I think education, because it's so new. And when we first started this conversation, we talked about how open everything was. But I think I still think it's balancing the needs of, different parties, investors and developers and traditional banks and what have you. And that's what I also mean by politics. It's people have specific ideas of how things should be, and they go out of their way to convince others, like what you're seeing with elections right now in the US. But sometimes they get pulled in these different directions, and that's what I think of when I'm talking about politics and governance, is that again, I don't think it necessarily goes back to bad actors or that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is people with different opinions and different priorities that clash because there's not things have not been fully thought through of what the implications are. And some people won't find out until you're in the thick of it, and you've already built a company structure around a specific model, or you already have specific partners that you think may solve for a pain point, but there's pieces that are missing. And sometimes that just it doesn't get solved for until it's actually it's too late, and you're there going, oh crap. What do I do now? This is not covered in our bylaws. This is not covered in our constitution. How would education for governance help, right? I wish we had a playbook for specific things. And so the kind of, when you talk about educating others in this space, I would love to see, I'd love to see a side-by-side comparison of different governances from different chains and see how they approach specific pain. But I don't know that, I'm sure somebody out there in the interwebs has solutions for that, but I would like to see more variation on that, right? I think that could be a really powerful educational piece for people who are building or trying to change some of the aspects of government.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. I would say crypto in many ways is a microcosm to what what already exists in some way. Very interesting, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's pretty, it's open, it's not regulated. It has a lot of potential, a lot of hiccups, a lot of teams that are trying to create new things. And so, I don't know, I think as long as, again, if we go back, the economics and the assurance that governance is going to protect these, these economics, I think we're going to see DeFi doing a lot better in this space and taking over. So it's getting there slowly. It still has a way to go, but we're making steps. So.
Yeah. Okay, so I know when I introduced you, we talked about your current position as the VP of Marketing at Near Protocol. So this is something that's new, right?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The pandemic, I had planned to take some time off. We had a merger and acquisition in April 2020, and I had tickets booked out of the country and was going to travel. And then lo and behold, the pandemic took hold. So I spent my time taking executive classes at Kellogg and looking at other protocols, and then taking coding classes, and really decided to take the money I would spend on tickets and put it into education. And I began looking around for protocols, and Near was doing some pretty interesting stuff. And I think I felt like they reminded me a lot of NEM and some of the other, they're very different, but the whole idea of, being a very developer friendly proof of stake public chain, that is something that really resonated with me. I think the biggest thing is that I saw with the Near team, super smart and savvy, right? Amazing background, but really they're able to open up blockchain app development for developers who aren't specialists. And to me, there was a lot of potential there. So I began checking their community and looking more. And I'm still, again, I'm a fan of a lot of different chains, and I love NEM, but the opportunity with Near came along, and I thought, oh wow, this is something where my past couple of years have been really hyper focused on NEM, which is one small aspect, but what if, you know, I take a macro look at what's happening in the industry. So I signed on as advisor for Predixa. I've been, you know, working with other protocols. I've been, and then ended up, you know, having a deeper engagement with the near team, which I'm thankful for. Just amazing. So I think the possibility of going deeper in the ecosystem and the industry is what I'm attracted to, and understand, and the interoperability aspect of the different chains to me is always going to be appealing. But at the heart of what I do is I work with companies and partners that have the same values that I do, and near very much so matched my values and my yeah, the mission, for my own personal mission for doing better and you know, for the world, and for what I want others to be able to do. And so again, that's why I really like I'm taking a look at my notes, but yeah, that's really what, when I think about near, I think about potential. And I want to be where the potential and the opportunity is to do better. So yeah. Anyway, great team, great team, great community.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, the near team is you know, it is a great team. It's a great project. You know, like you said, it's I think we're starting to see more and more protocols that have a clear identity of, you know, what they want to see in the world. And I think as someone who,
oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Yes. I was going to say, I look at, it's not just even projects building on the protocol layer. It's like, it's exchanges like you, Kraken, other companies that are really helping to add value to the space and are defining and taking a stand for what the future looks like, right? And you saw some earlier this year, CoinDesk had some hiccups around that. Their values didn't match their employees' values, and that, you know, caused some friction. But I would say I think people are starting to pivot to wanting to spend their time in places where it matters most, and where it matters to them. So I don't know. I'm super impressed with the teams that I've been working with.
Yeah.
They're good.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Yeah, it's I think it's a really fun time and an interesting time.
Yeah, me too. I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is, you know, I'm not looking at news. I'm looking at CoinMarketCap and looking at you know, crypto news and looking at Twitter. So I got stuck in that cycle. But yeah, you know, clearly I got the bug. I've been doing it since 2016. Just like, and other people who've been around 2012, 2013. Man, you just get, you know, get addicted because it's so exciting. It's a convergence of like technology and entertainment and all these things that are happening. It's exciting.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Not
so,
to. No, please go ahead.
I was gonna say rapid fire. I think. Should we do rapid fire?
Yeah, I was gonna say let's go for it. Not to diminish kind of like the, you know, like the value and like the deep complexity of crypto, but let's go superficial. Let's get your hot takes.
Let's do it. Yeah, my hot takes. Okay, go for it.
All right. Number one, will any DeFi asset overtake Bitcoin in market cap? Yes, no.
Yes.
Okay. Is DeFi overhyped? Yes, no.
Yes. I think right now, yes.
Yeah. Okay. What season of DeFi are we in? Spring, summer, fall, or winter?
Spring.
Spring. Okay. So when you say spring, it's
I think the leaves are, you know, poking up through the snow. I think
very
spring.
cool. Okay. Okay. Top DeFi project you're interested in?
I really like Radix.
Sorry, which one?
That's good. Radix, Radix, RADIX.
I will have to look into it.
Yes.
And
Very
okay, last question. Will 2021 be a bear or bull market?
bull. Please bull.
Same.
We've been waiting. I'm ready.
Yep.
2017. Yeah, it's just like 2017. Come on, bring it. You're sitting here for a while.
Yep.
Mhm.
Likewise.
Mhm.
Great. Well, that was, I would
Yeah,
say,
well,
a
thank
very,
you.
yeah, no, I was gonna say that's a very kind of like, I feel like we covered a lot. I really appreciate your insight today.
It was so fun. I mean, I love talking about this, and I love what you and the exchange are doing and the teams. And I think having educational series like this is super
Mm-hmm.
important. Perspective and diversity and understanding and breaking down those walls that are preventing mainstream adoption. This is what we need more of, more discussions like this. So it's an honor to be with you and the team today. So thank you.
Likewise. Thank you for your time.
Okay, bye everyone.